All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar where we're looking at the AI playbook for home care CEOs and executives. Support at home was intended to simplify the delivery of care, as we all know. Yet for many providers, the reality has been more administration, more documentation, more compliance obligations, and more pressure on already stretched teams. At the same time, we're seeing a growing number of organisations using AI and technology to fundamentally rethink how work is done, not as a future concept, but as something delivering results today. For those of you who haven't met me, my name's James Wiltshire. I'm the CEO of the DCM Group, and I will be your host for this webinar. Joining me on the call, we have Janine Buckley, who's the founding partner in Kindle Consulting. We have John Staines, the Chief Information Officer for Benetas, and we have Tate Johnson, who's the Chief Technology Officer at the Lookout Way. Before we begin, it's worth taking a step back and really looking at the bigger picture. Over the past 12 months, productivity has become one of the most discussed topics across our editorial platforms. And you'll see that if you regularly follow us via the weekly source newsletters that go out every Tuesday, Thursday, and certainly through our Saturday publications that go as well. It's also a strong conversation as we meet with executives and senior management across the sector. And the reason is simple. The aged care sector faces growing demand, workforce constraints, and increasing regulatory expectations. Yet for many providers, financial sustainability remains elusive. If funding is constrained, workforce availability is constrained, and demand continues to grow, then productivity becomes one of the few levers available to operators seeking to build a sustainable organisation. We estimate that there's about 20% efficiency lost at the moment through systems and practices that are currently in place. And that's really where the conversation could lead us today, how we can use better technology and systems out there in AI to solve the issue of productivity and do such in a way that really allows providers to have a more sustainable business model going future. That's why we're here today. That's the conversation we're planning to have today. So over the course of the next hour, if you would like to ask a question, we have a Q&A function that's turned on at the moment. We'll be monitoring that over the course. We also have the discussion open as well that we will be monitoring, but we just ask any questions you would like to ask our experts. Please put them in the Q&A. We'll be monitoring over the course of the webinar, and we'll be putting the questions to them over the course of the next 55 minutes. So to start us off, I'd like to introduce everyone to Janine Buckley. As a founding partner of Kindle Consulting, Janine, you work alongside aged care providers across Australia, helping them to navigate strategy, transformation, governance, and operational performance. Importantly, you actually do research in the sector through your sector surveys. And what I thought we'd do, just to set a bit of a scene, is maybe reflect on some of the surveys that you've been doing at the moment. And there might be the discussions we've had in planning for today. You've got some really interesting data points that talk to the preparedness of the sector for having conversations around productivity, but also the systems that they have available, because you can't talk productivity without talking systems, and you can't talk about either of those without the lead into the conversation around artificial intelligence and what that can do. So, Janine, I might ask you, what are you seeing out there in the sector? What are the providers telling you, and what's coming up in the research that you're doing?
Yes, thanks, James. And like you said, we've been running, particularly for home care, a home care outlook survey for the last 4 years. And I think that, I guess, the most important result when we're talking about the conversation of AI today and the opportunity is when we ask the question, about the suitability of their IT systems. This year, 64% of home care providers who responded, there was about 315, said that their systems are not meeting their needs or non-existent. And that figure of 64% of home care providers, that has not changed in the last 4 years. And so I guess we need to think about what that might mean. And it can, for a lot of home care, particularly, and even in residential care, resource constraints is a really big issue. So I'm sure people know these stats, but when you're looking at, say, there's 2 home care programs, Commonwealth Home Support has about 1,300 providers, and 990 of those have less than $1 million of funding a year of just funding. When you look at support at home, there's about 900 odd providers, but 25% of the providers hold 40% of the market, which means there's a lot of small providers. And then in residential care, nearly half of them have only single providers or 1 to 3, facilities. So we've got small providers who just may not have the funds or the resources to invest in it. So they've got legacy systems, systems that are fragmented, and are not, are not sort of achieving what they need to achieve. Like you said, there's a lot of increased compliance, and their systems are not, a lot of systems are not doing the heavy lifting. And so I'd imagine there's huge opportunity there for AI.
I think that's exactly why we're having this conversation, because there is huge opportunity. Do you find these organizations are having the conversation in the sense of looking at their business practices, or this can't see the forest through the trees at the moment because there's just been so much change and so much reform? The focus has really got to be on keeping the lights on for many of these businesses. So
Yeah.
do they have the executive time to have these conversations, do you think?
Look, I'm not confident that all organizations are prioritizing this, and it's a non-negotiable, really, when it comes to ITC. Like what I've been saying for years, and my experience being 20 years as a CEO in home care, is that your technology is the bricks and mortar of your organization, of your business. So when we think of residential care, traditionally it was the big buildings, and they had the big plans on the wall. Boards need to have their ITC plan on the wall. This is really what's going to do the heavy lifting. Is going to make them sustainable. And I'm not sure there has been enough effort at a governance level as well as an executive level in really making sure that this is one of the number one agenda items, not just AI. First is just technology roadmap, and then of course what underpins that is the use of AI. So I'm not sure they are, and I think they need to, and I don't think it matters what size they are. They need to start, raising this up at a board level. And it should be number one on their risk plan.
Mm. There's a few things you said there I think we're going to touch on over the next little while. So, but you've mentioned a few times about the ITC plan. You mentioned about 64% of providers have systems in place that aren't fit for purpose, which is a great segue. So it's almost like we planned this very well, Janine, to introduce John Staines. And as I mentioned, you're the Chief Technology Officer there at Benetas, one of Australia's largest not-for-profit care providers. And this topic is quite relevant as this is a journey that you've been on quite recently, John, with developing your ITC plan, which has obviously led into looking at identifying pressure points within the business that something like AI will be able to solve for you. So just for the benefit of those that are joining us today, can you just take us through the journey that you've been on over the last little while in leading you to adopting AI as something that can help solve problems for you within your business?
Thank you, James. So I guess one of the challenges with home care as a service is that the concept of organizing people to go out and do visits is a very large orchestration that essentially requires a lot of humans to poorly do the organization, or can have automation and AI engines to basically do everything from intelligent scheduling and rostering to route optimization planning and resource utility optimization. The other thing is, in the industry, I have to say that it took us quite a while to actually find a platform that had a reasonable degree of automation at all. The majority of systems out there are still just data entry systems. So a lot of that stuff needs humans instead of AI or intelligent automation to do. So in our space, that we had two challenges we wanted to solve. One is for our strategic plan, where we want clients to live their best lives. It was, how can we deliver the best possible care to our clients that is possible in the industry, and also how can we do that sustainably, especially with the shrinking margins that the New Age Care Act has introduced. So in that space, we focused actually on the concept of delivering the care, where it's a very knowledge intensive activity. Now, in that space, the first piece is that the new regulation via the New Age Care Act is increasingly prescriptive. So that lends itself very much to, I guess, AI creating those care plans, doing them better than humans can. But then the other pieces in the care delivery, including a handover, that, as an example, we would be delivering 700 to 1,000 care activities a day. In that space, that could generate easily 1,000 care notes a day. You can imagine that scores, if not well over 100 hours of humans then looking over those care notes to basically identify trends in clients improving or worsening or otherwise. It's not actually sustainable to not use AI to do that work, especially when your margins have shrunk significantly. So in that space, we have an always-on AI agent that basically is actively looking at the activities that are going on, the care notes, the trends in the care notes, and then the higher trends in general. And what that has done, also then using the AI to prioritize while one client might have worsened dramatically over another. That has basically created a zero error capability for us to actually deliver incredible care to our clients. At the same time, there are practical constraints where I would call it unproductive administration. If we're basically shuffling paper around, we get, let's say on a 700 visits to 1,000 visits a day, we might get 200 changes 24 hours beforehand. We need intelligent automation and AI to reshuffle the deck chairs, replan routes, and reorganize resources to actually then deliver those new care, those modified care activities. In the real world, there are a few platforms that do that every time you change a visit. But those were the game changers for us, which allowed us, number one, to remain sustainable, to adapt accurately to the new standards, and to deliver on the top of that improved care using those tools. I don't believe it would be possible without those AI engines.
And just so, John, that's quite a rollout that you've been going through. How long has it taken you to get to this point? Because obviously we might have some people joining us here today that are thinking of starting the journey. We might have some that are pressed, some that don't know where to begin. But this probably doesn't sound like a plan that happened overnight, rather than something you consciously at a leadership team level made a decision to embark on. What's been the time frame of your journey to get to where you're at today?
Well, the first, so yes, there was awareness at an executive and a board level that basically we wanted to develop a high-performing business to make sure that we were sustainable for the New Age Care Act, but also that we could have in evidence, high-quality, measurable, and optimizable standards of care for our clients. The journey of, I guess, introspection to identify, I guess, challenges and opportunities within the business, alongside looking at platforms in the industry, was around 2 years. The reality is your day one release of your services isn't going to be perfect. There was the additional challenge of November kicking in with the New Age Care Act and New Age Care Standards, which basically required us to overhaul our financial modelling and processing to add that to the mix. I would suggest that so the New Age Care Act did elongate then the stabilisation by around 6 months. So I would say that we are in a strong position now, and that we had about 3 months of strong operation pre-New Age Care Act, and then when the New Age Care Act kicked in, it didn't affect the quality of the services, but it did affect the support services, financial processing, back office, having to pivot to the new financial modelling, new ways of claiming, new ways of identifying, because of course, don't forget, now when we have a new service model when clients call, there are 8 tiers, not 4 tiers of compensation. So there was a significant load also, which was not to do with AI per se, but coping with the New Age Care Act. That said, the availability of those intelligent tools meant that our optimization of adapting to the new Aged Care Act was much more rapid and much more powerful.
Mm. That's great. Thanks, John. And so that'll take us across to Tate. So Tate, you're with the Lookout Way, a vendor to the sector, and obviously, I'm actually going to let you explain your business and your business model in a little bit more detail to sort of set the scene for everyone around the value that you can add into their businesses. But in setting that scene, can you tell to us a bit about, you've obviously got clients that are out there. What are they coming to you with? Are they coming to you with that roadmap, as we call it, or are they coming to you to begin with, we do know we need to be using this, but we don't know where to start? So if you can start with a bit about the Lookout Way, let everyone understand what it is you do, how you use AI as a platform, and then what your clients are coming to you with problem-wise.
Sure. Thanks, James. Yeah, so we make Lookout, which is a care management platform for supporting, enabling organizations to do that orchestration all the way through from intake through to rostering, through to government claiming, and then importantly, the evidencing of activities and supporting that into your quality reporting. And our journey actually, our journey of why we existed, why we do it, came from trying to solve that problem around how do you give great quality care in something that requires many people, like the amount of people it takes to show up to put 1 hour of service into the home. And our observation was that we basically started building this 10 years ago. And our observation was that was nothing that existed that understood that you needed to have the field workers connected directly back to your care managers, connected directly back to the rostering and having the billing and all the things in the one place. Because the biggest problem in orchestration is the communication and sharing of information. And the absence of that means that you have lots of busy people doing the best work they can to deliver services, but there's basically leakage everywhere because every individual decision that's being made leaks along the way. And the only way you can fix that is to get your data and your systems into one place, and then you can begin to move to a more proactive sort of a higher order sort of model. So typically, when organizations come to us, there's usually on two ends of the spectrum, but one is typically that they want to give that great care. And they're not able to live up to the standards that they want to sustainably, the way that they're doing it. So they're kind of looking for a whole sort of evolution of their model to kind of take them into the future, taking it into how the market is evolving. And the second one is people would typically have, we're part of a larger roadmap in terms of that what the organization is doing, and they've got a big good plan already. But either way, we work with our customers on both sides.
Yeah, great. And just we've had a question come through, so we are checking the questions that come in. So please continue to write them in. As a vendor, how do you find the digital maturity of the sector from some of the potential clients and clients that you're dealing with at the moment? Do you find they've really got their head around this space, or are you hand-holding to take them on a bit of a journey when it comes to understanding process efficiency first and then system second?
Yeah, I feel like people don't know what's possible, and so they are looking for kind of to be shown a better way, to be shown sort of best practice, and so. Something that we focus on, that we're quite proud of, and how we focus on, is really making sure that the things that we've built have been built from like our knowledge of running an actual care business and working really closely with our customers to understand what are the actual operational sort of headwinds that you encounter, and how do you turn that around? Yeah.
That's really great there, Tate. So especially around sophistication problems, but also they're coming to you in a way to help you guide them through to develop the roadmap. So coming back to yourself, Janine, because you mentioned the roadmap first, how are you finding the conversations with your clients and your boards in developing these roadmaps? Do you find that they've got their head around the potential, or they're still looking for assistance to navigate their way through the day-to-day first?
Look, I think it depends on the organisation. Like I said at the beginning, there's a lot of small organisations in this sector who don't have one IT person on staff, not one. And so internally, they don't necessarily have that capability, but that doesn't mean they can't move forward. I think that is where you partner. Now, whether you're partnering with a vendor like Tate, whether you're partnering with a managed service provider, but you just need to find someone who that can bring in that skill set. That's my view, and I see it at all levels. I even see where they still may have an IT team, but they still bring in additional support where it's needed. So I think it just depends on the provider. Just because you don't have an IT person on staff doesn't mean you can't progress. Not at all. That's in my view. So I think it's just about finding that trusted partner if you don't have that skill set.
But I think before you get to the capability part, Janine, certainly taking from what you and John have said just in the early stages of the discussion here, you need to have a bit of an understanding of what the problems are you need to be solving for. Because if you're leading to building the capability first, you might have jumped a rather important step. And we do want to talk about building that playbook. The playbook should surely start with understanding the problems within the business that need to be solved, and then put the capability in around it.
And also, absolutely, we need to know what the problem is and quantify it, I think, because then you're even saying, okay, it could be really simple and saying, what are our staff wasting our time on? What are, workshop with them. What are the 10 things that we spend most time on? And I'll give you examples, the simplest things where they're going, we enter data into this system and then we enter data into that system, a different system. So they're duplicating data. They can't extract data. They've got information everywhere. This is where AI, I imagine, can bridge the gap. But the role of providers is to truly understand what is their priorities, and they would just need to have a meeting with their staff. They'll be able to very quickly come up with their top 10 priorities. But also, I think it's about investing in understanding what's possible. Like, we all have to do our own education, on what is the world of AI and where is it progressing. It's moving so quickly. To think that the organisation is going to do that for you, I think every individual working, it doesn't matter what industry these days, needs to really start to understand what's happening. And people coming here today is exactly what organizations need to continue to do: invest in understanding what's possible and what's happening.
And that's obviously quite a time-consuming task in itself. Like, if you go out to the business and ask the 10 things that that frustrate them or that they're wasting time on, Tate used the great term around busy work and leakage. John, I'm assuming this was sort of the starting point in building your roadmap, was going out to the people on the ground to understand their frustrations first and foremost. Was that something that was business-led, or were you bringing advisors in to help sort of build that first part of your roadmap?
I guess at our scale, we use our own internal resources to do that work. In terms of assessment, it's basically a combination of the people on the road who are basically providing feedback on wasteful trips, as an example, and of course internally looking at the amount of services we're able to perform compared to the number of resources, and identifying, I guess, waste or dead time or erroneous time booked because of human error in effectively a very complex logistics exercise that happens every single day, where you're preparing, as I said, 700 plus visits to go out, route optimization, which is requires a fair bit of intelligent automation to make sure you've got the right people on the right routes, and the routes are as short as possible, and they're also sequenced. All of these things reduce a dramatic amount of what Tate mentioned is leakage. But I'll give you a couple of examples. So I guess in one of our previous systems, you would need to do those replanning activities manually, and you're going to have humans doing their best. But when you've got so many activities to replan, it's not going to be particularly accurate. So there's a classic point of leakage, and those were the points which we understood were things that needed to be optimized. At the same time, understanding that the new Age Care Act is coming up is supporting the workers with already prepared plans and already prepared templates for them to provide then and update their care notes. And also, as those care activities occur, that they're proactively assessed, because the notes are useless if you don't pay attention to them and actually then see how your client is trending. So the reality is, across the board, the touch points that Tate mentioned, everything from basically, original intake right through to care plans, right through to setting up the care activities. One of the things is, of course, cost to serve. So one of the things that we found frustrating was the absence of granularity in information systems, so that we can identify cost to serve. And so the information system that's required needs to have all of those levels of automation. So yes, it's about AI, but the reality is the maturity of the organization to deliver efficient services so that you can lower your cost to serve and increase your quality of service, that needs a high-performing business supported by a high-performing set of platforms or platform. And it was that we actually looked at a number of platforms before we found one that was going to meet our needs. And that actually is one of the reasons why the journey was 2 years. So I have to be upfront. I don't believe that the majority of platforms available today actually are performing at their best in terms of utilization of AI. As an example, when you've got some organizations going, "Oh, we use AI to measure the productivity of your workforce," but what's the point of that if that same platform doesn't have the tools to improve the visits and the schedules to measure the productivity of the workforce? So there's a bit of smoke screening at the moment, potentially, where you have AI being sold as something to do intelligent analytics without the foundations of the platform actually supporting the efficient allocation of those resources. So it needs to go all the way down to the bottom, which is basically, we've got this big logistics exercise every day with lots of variation, and it needs to be, and so you need to have intelligent automation and AI starting at that level, and then all the way through to, of course, that makes it sustainable. And then on the top is basically your actual care activities being a very knowledge-intensive exercise. The AI agents will be there to support the regulatory requirements and then the ongoing care assessments and care activities.
At any time, John, and I'm coming back to a question that someone's put on the screen about, and you mentioned a few things there around some of the questions you were asking of the vendors when you were going through a process. At any point in time in developing your roadmap, were you thinking, okay, are we going down a path of finding a vendor, like a lookout, or building something internally which just suits our own needs? So these are sorts of fork in the road decisions in your roadmap that you had to sit down and have a real frank conversation with you and your team and your board about?
To be frank, home care platforms, I would argue, are incredibly complex beasts. It is not a smart financial decision to try to build your own. It just wouldn't add up. So it's one of those things where you have to find the best platform to meet your needs. Now, I would argue if you're a very small business, a lot of those logistical activities, yes, you can rely on humans to do, and they'll do them quite well. But when you get several hundred, as I said, visits a day, you need automation. You need it at scale. So it was recognized that basically what we did is we looked at all of the portions of service activities that the business has to carry out. We assessed the relative efficiency and opportunities for improvement for all of those things. That's everything from assessments to literally scheduling and rostering to actual financial management, route optimization, all of these things. And we identified all of the opportunities in those spaces. And then we looked at the facilities within the platforms to deliver those activities. So, for example, one is the actual registration of services originally from customers and the ability to make those granular enough so that you can understand the profit and loss of those particular services. Then it is, you've got the rostering section. Then you've got the route optimization. How am I going to organize people to go to what visits so that we have minimized time on the road so that you've got maximized time with your client. The icing on the cake where the massive difference occurred is basically also time with your client and then using that information for assessing the client's care trend. Those were the overnight changes that the AI brought. So there was a step change in capability of service quality, but also in our case, we have all of those things in terms of operating efficiency that needed to be addressed. And therefore it needed basically intelligent workflows, as I said, intelligent optimization, basically a service model which was going to immediately be able to activate for the new Aged Care Act. And so we were lucky to find one that does all of those things. And the change was noticeable, very noticeable. It was one of those that the workforce is extremely energized with the results because those frustrations have eased.
Great. I'm going to come to you now, Tate, because John's mentioned a few times around use of the word integration. We've had a question come in, so this is really good. You're coming in then as a vendor. John sits down with you and says, sort of, this is the problem or problems that we need to solve. You're obviously a vendor in this space, well established, working for a number of providers. How do you then look at it by way of an integration piece? Because obviously, John, like many providers, has a home care supported home problem to solve, and he's gone through, logistics and rosters and services and the like. John's also then in the aged care space as well with aged care homes. Are you coming at it from the point of view of just solving the immediate problem in one service area, such as supported home, or are you looking at it from the integration piece of going into the residential aged care as well and becoming, that one vendor that can integrate across various different areas of the business, provided it's all within that care space?
Yeah. So I think coming back to talking about the problems, right? The problem in home care, right? Every single person's home is a unique workplace, and you're sending your workers in there one at a time, usually. And so you have a distribution problem in terms of how do you ensure that the information flows through? Like ideally, home care or care in general is the most human thing that we can do to care for another person. It's all about the face-to-face, and the technology should be melting into the background. So the techniques that we developed and learned from in partnership with our customers over the years have all been geared around this sort of principle that when a worker shows up to the home, they have everything they need. They've seen the most recent updates, what's changed. They put the phone away and they just give great care. But when they finish that, they walk out of the home and they're able to quickly leave their notes or voice their notes into the app, and that's automatically flowing through to the care manager. That's read over by the AI that then helps to prioritize it. That problem is inherently a distributed asynchronous communication problem. And that's actually the opposite of what happens in a residential setting or in a healthcare setting, where typically it's the same space and you have the people going around. And so our view is that the systems that solve that problem poorly solve the problem of the home care problem, which is a different set of properties. However, If you're somebody who provides both sets of services, then I guess from an overarching group perspective, you might be sharing workforce, or at the very least, you're sharing information. It's really important that when you're making decisions about bringing systems into your organization, ideally you're doing this because you're going to get an immediate amount of value that's going to handle or solve. I mean, John just mentioned before around like you probably shouldn't consider building because an enormous undertaking, and I can definitely tell you that it is. But nonetheless, bringing a system in shouldn't also mean giving up integration or giving up your ability to be able to make it flow into other parts of your business. So while what we do is we strive to make the experience and the operations of actually delivering activities to be excellent. If you go and look below the hood, we also have an amazing integration capability also built into the platform that you can show any IT person and they would know what to do with it. And so you can so we've basically gone for, if I was to summarize it, we've gone for make this work really, really well for solving the home care problem, and then make it super interoperable, make it so you can pull all the data out of the system. All that data is your data. You should be able to pull that out of the system and make it or push and pull back into it again. So it can then nicely fit into any other system, so that overall it should be an amazing custodian inside of your greater ecosystem for how you think about building systems to serve your organization efficiently and to do good quality service. So that's probably the position that we've taken. So firmly home care, but a great custodian in any system.
Excellent. And that integration piece, I think you spoke on really well then about who owns the data. I'm going to talk about data for a minute because we have a few questions come through. This is always the point that people are getting their head around when it comes to data, privacy, resident information, staff information, AI systems, and all of these sorts of things. Janine, I might start with yourself. You speak to a number of operators across the country. Are these the conversations of data, the integrity that sometimes make boards more risk averse to going down this path, or a hamstring in progress? How is this conversation happening in operators across the country from what you can see?
So I think there is a nervousness, of course, and so there should be, because it needs to be managed, a risk around privacy and around compliance. Like, what happens if we don't govern this or manage this well, and there's breaches. Also, of course, when we start talking about care-related matters, and we hear about hallucinations and all these things that do happen and can happen in AI, about will we be be given incorrect information? Could that impact client outcomes? And so, of course, there is risk associated with AI that needs to be managed, and that's why you need really good governance. And you need to know what you need to make sure that you know what you're doing and you understand whatever you're going to use AI for, that's implemented well and those risks are monitored. And so I guess, yeah, so there is a nervousness. But, I can remember back in 2009, we started implementing smart home technology. It's nothing like AI. We're putting in, starting to look at, dementia watches and all those things that you put into the home, And, back then it was, it wasn't like, let's not do it because there's risks. It was, how do we implement this? How do we understand what the risks are, and how do we manage those? And I think this is no different. It's just implementing well and having good governance. So I think you've got to move forward.
And I think that's a really good, dotted line to connect to with those sort of technology shifts a decade ago. Yeah. And it wasn't just around, a risk of it being a reason not to do something. It was a risk to figure out a way to overcome because the upside outweighed, the challenges that you faced in front of you. And so when you're looking at the governance around the data and keeping all that information protected, there also then becomes the other conversation around, will this implementation of a technology solution enable better quality of care on the ground? Isn't there, Janine? That's a big part of the conversation from a governance perspective.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what AI can do, humans just couldn't possibly do, and we just couldn't do it efficiently anyway. I should say that. And so this, there's risk, but I imagine the benefits will outweigh those if it's governed well. Imagine we've talked about predictive analytics for years. Imagine the role in that. Imagine the role even in, like we implement systems, and I'm sure everyone online has done it. I've done it millions of times over decades, where you implement a system, you think it's working well, even if it's like something simple, like a customer feedback program. And, and what happens is that you get down the track and there's missing data and data hasn't been followed up. And, and imagine the role that AI could have in the whole internal audit, data governance. Like it's just too exciting. I think you've got to weigh up the risk, but the benefits have to outweigh it. It just has to.
So, Tate, how do you respond to that as a vendor? Obviously, Janine set the platform that boards are having the conversation, and it's a manageable risk, really, is what it sounds like. But obviously, you're going to have someone like a John come to you and say, right, for us to proceed, you need to satisfy our board and our executive team that there's a level of data integrity, there's protections in place, that this information isn't going to be misused, but more importantly, then that we use the point we can continue to own the data, that it remains ours to look at. And then the next one is the integrity of the system to ensure, we hear the term AI hallucinations at times. So how do you go back to your clients and give them the confidence that you have the quality controls in place around data integrity, minimizing hallucinations, making sure the system is supporting quality care outcomes for the clients at the end of the day?
I mean, yeah, this has been something we've been kind of working on for 8 years. First of all, with sort of the reading in the notes, and then most recently, the huge productivity gains we've seen with care planning. I think. Just I guess off the front set, if you look at something like care planning, that's a very labor intensive task. You have the conversation, you then have to write up stuff, copy and paste, get the IAT in, do your assessments. When you finish writing it all, hopefully there's no spelling mistakes, and hopefully it meets the new aged care standards. And really, I think that what it means is that people have a choice between doing lots of overtime to get those care plans up to that sort of standard, or doing lower quality care plans. And so I think everyone's probably had experience using AI themselves to kind of maybe try to assist or write with that, but then you've got the problems around, well, but where did that data go? How did that happen? That's one person doing it. So the way to describe how we've solved that problem, we think, is we actually took two things we did. We came up with a set of principles, and then we also looked at how do care companies, in my opinion, are already advantaged in being able to do this. How do care companies already do governance? How do they already there's incidences that go on, there's things that the regulation that changes. Care companies are already advantaged, in my opinion, with thinking about how they continuously improve. And I think that the rollout of AI in the service of trying to achieve these productivity gains is the same thing. The benefit can be huge, and I think that the risks can be mitigated. And the way you do that, I guess, our principles around it is that anytime that there is AI generated output, it should be clearly labeled as such. A human should always ultimately reserve the judgment over ensuring nothing should happen automatically. It should be triggered by a human who has triggered the event, and then anything that is done should be reversible or overridable. The way that you kind of minimize hallucinations and those kinds of things is that we seed it with a lot of context. So remember that when you've got a system like Lookout, and you talk about the orchestration problem, it means that Lookout has a lot of data about your client. And so if it's got a lot of data about your client, and we've also given it the Australian aged care standards. It's then able to use that context. If you give it that great amount of context, and of course your company's sort of care plan template as well, it then produces really high quality results. Like when we show this to people when they try it out for the first time, they're genuinely going, wow. And I bet you there's going to be a point in time where they look back at when they've rolled this out, and they'll see that from that point in time, all their care plans got super comprehensive and super consistent. And more importantly, they could have confidence, as John was kind of saying earlier as well, meeting the Australian aged care standards or being told where it's potentially not meeting it, which then is improving quality. So so that's one way of doing it. The second way of doing it is that when all this content is all being generated, it's extremely important that it's transparent and auditable. So we should be able to, in my opinion, be able to go to a place in your platform or however you're deploying AI into your organization, and you should be able to bring it up to a governance committee, and you should be able to say, check it out, this is the forensics of what happened and how we got here. And more importantly, this is how we can change it and evolve it to continue making it better. That's how care companies already do governance, and that's how they already make quality good. And so I think the lesson is to fold AI into how you already do your governance. And then there's just the basic things that need to be there, which is make sure that your vendor has contracts so that the data that's being processed is staying wholly in Australia. Make sure that they're promising not to be sharing or doing any trading on that data with the third party and frontier models. And make sure they've got a good cybersecurity program, that they get external auditors in to do penetration testing and look at all their controls. That's the governance piece you put on top of all of this to be able to realize the benefit. And yeah, one of our customers estimates with the care planner, they're going to save about 11,000 hours of care planning time on intake from their intake workforce. And if you put that into dollars, it's quite substantial. And what they're thinking about is not cool, that's shrink the workforce. It's cool, now I can redirect that into all these other higher order activities. And so to be able to handle the increasing demand that's coming in.
I'm going to come to that point in a minute. I'm looking at time and managing a few other questions. That's certainly one I want to get to. So John, we've just been talking about sort of governance. Tate answered excellently vendor side, how we would address the governance issues. Obviously, at some point, Tate said something similar to yourself to get your confidence with their product. Is that something the board's been able to get their head around by through this roadmap that you've put together to actually understand that there is a significant upside through adopting this technology and rolling it out through the business?
Well, there's a couple of things, James. The first bit is risk is always front and foremost of mind. So in that space, I guess we had to develop a competency to make a determination whether or not a particular AI tool was fit for purpose. And in that space, the first piece, obviously there are two types of risk. One is data breach, and the second one is data integrity, hallucination, junk data. So the first one has to be met. In other words, that the process doesn't operate in a hostile country or operate in an uncontrolled environment, so that the data can be siphoned. So that's the first piece. That's the first gate, and we have to make sure that we did have to make sure that quality gate was met in terms of our chosen platform. The other one is hallucination. Now, the simple fact is that the AI agents we use, they are basically customized for the particular tasks. So for example, one AI agent for route optimization, one AI agent for care notes scanning, one AI agent for plan preparation. Because those agents are effectively then hardwired to perform those tasks, they have guardrails, which means that they are significantly less error prone than the humans that might otherwise do that task. In other words, the risk question flips over to the other side because you've got agentic AI, not general AI, doing that work. So you're constraining it with the rules it can play under, which is what Tate mentioned. In other words, the act and the formula that it can operate, and therefore how it can treat the in this case, let's use the care notes as a particular thing. So what we find is we've had no incidents of hallucination. Now, where language is horrendously incorrect, of course, like a human, it's not going to make sense of it, but then the AI will point out, I didn't understand this piece. So I appreciate that doesn't answer your question, but with regard to those two sections, those are two very important points I'd like to point out.
No, absolutely. So reflecting on your 2-year journey, John, we've had a couple of questions come in, and we did speak about this in the previous. What does success look like? So how are you measuring success through the implementation of your roadmap? Is it workplace efficiency? Have you got commercial KPIs that are pushing out an ROI based on your investment? What are some of the business metrics that you're looking at today to reflect that the journey has been a success, or that the journey still has some ways to go?
Yeah. So I guess there are a number of pillars. One is that the first pillar is basically get that evidence-based quality of care for our clients. Especially under the New Aged Care Act, it becomes measurable under the New Aged Care Act. And then the second tier is I guess operating maturity, the efficiency and effectiveness that the organisation is operating under to deliver those services, and that's therefore underpinned by staff satisfaction. So the engagement and satisfaction of the staff in delivering those services. So we have KPIs across clients also, so client satisfaction of us, operating efficiency and effectiveness, and staff satisfaction in doing the work. Ultimately, all coming down to the client is saying they're very happy with our work, and the evidence is there that the quality of care is improved to the degree that we want it to, and the business is operating very efficiently, and the staff are fully engaged and satisfied. So across those four.
And I think that last one is quite an important one. You consider AI is very much a change management piece, and it's yes, a change management piece for the people on the ground as well as the people in the corporate offices and the like. And quite often the narrative around AI implementation is one of fear. So my assumption would be, and I can see Tate nodding and Janine nodding, so I might come back to you both on this one. So obviously taking the staff on a journey is a key part of any roadmap, because it's not about introducing a system to exit people from the business, but you said the number of 11,000 hours were saved for one client that could be redeployed into more other areas of the business. Is that the lens you took, John?
Well, in our case, it was that we needed to, in order to serve our customer base, these technologies had to come along, this efficiency had to come along to meet that demand. So in fact, with the workforce, there was no fear. It was the exact opposite. Give us some tools which are half useful. Have us not spending time sitting in the car for an hour or two waiting for the next visit. Why do I have to go from here all the way to whoop whoop and then back? Because the route I've been told to do it that way. Why couldn't they have been flipped over? So the reality was, in our case, that there was almost a sense of relief and a fairly quick uptake, because all of a sudden the day-to-day work was so much more client intensive instead of waste or admin intensive. Yeah. So but the staff had already provided that feedback at the strategic planning that there's waste, there's admin, etc., etc. And so they knew that the tooling that was going to exist was going to address those. We're going to give them better tools to do their job. So in this case, it wasn't to fear; it was in fact enthusiasm and relief.
So, Janine, are you finding that when you talk to clients that the staff on the ground are hungry for this technology at the moment?
Oh, I think they're overwhelmed, and I think if they could see just overwhelmed with what's happened in these last 7 months, and I think if if they were heard, if they're involved in the problem identification and I can see those problems getting solved, I could only imagine that that's going to be exactly what John said. And I just want to point out too, and I'm not trying to make any light of the concerns that are in the chat about AI being used for client data, that it is a risk. And it is, we've been talking about that. But I also just want to point out that it's no bigger risk than your own staff when it comes to no, to be honest, like if you've ever done any of that human engineering testing, like just an example is, I promise, like 2 weeks ago, I got an email and it was a list of client details from somebody, a big Excel sheet from a transport provider who accidentally put my Janine name in instead of whoever they were sending the client data to. That wasn't AI, that was a human. When we've done human engineering testing in my old role at Ferris Care, both the payroll officer and a worker had given access to their IT systems. And I went to a client's the other day and it was in a day center and they had open filing cabinets with client files in it. All I'm saying is that, that humans are equally risky, and it's about managing it. So I just want to put some, a little bit of reality in that. I know it might, you may not agree. I know we have to be diligent, but there is risk now and it's got to be managed. So I think we've got to weigh that up with the benefits.
Absolutely. And I think that's an excellent point. I can already see someone put in cheekily, I like it. Totally agree. Humans have their own algorithm. So in the AI space and the algorithm, completely agree with that. Now, I'm conscious of time. I've got a couple of minutes left. So I'm going to start with you, Janine, because you're on my screen at the moment as I'm talking. 5 years from now, you're looking at your little crystal ball. What's this supported home space going to be like when it comes to AI and technologies and systems? Have you given much thought to what's ahead of us?
Look, this is a silly example, but this is my dream. Can I tell you my dream? So my dream is I'm a care worker and I'm in a car. These are simple. And I want to be, and I go from home to home to home to home. We probably don't have care workers online, but there's a lot of people online who've done this. And I want to hop in my car and say, hey, whoever, hey, Jenny, tell me about my next client. And while I'm driving to the next house, I'm getting this detailed handover about this client, their care plan, their preferences, their risks, what I'm needing to do at that visit. And then when I hop back in that car, I give a handover to Jenny about, and she might prompt me some questions about what I saw in the day, and I gave her a handover. And so I walked in and I was able to delight that client and protect that client and deliver what that client wanted. And because I'm already busy, I don't get, trying to play with my phone, find the notes. It's never there, that I'm just actually given a handover to both ways to the client. That's what I want to see. And also, can I give you two?
Yeah,
so
go for it.
John talked about logistics. He talked about optimization of rosters was the best thing we ever did. It changed our lives, but it's not just about logistics, about route optimization. It is about when you've got a system that can weigh up a few things. It can weigh up route optimization, as well as matching the client with the right staff member, consistency of staff member, ensuring that when it's calculating the roster, that it's giving your staff not just their minimum hours, but their ideal hours, so that they've got enough money to pay for their mortgage and will stay with you. So it is about having AI who can juggle all of that and you prioritize what's most important and it deliver you the logistics that you need. And also, and I'm sure Tate's doing it, that's not just your staff, but also effectively managing your associate providers. That's what I want.
Excellent. I'll come back to Tate in a minute. John, what about from yourself? So obviously you've been building your roadmap. What's your next sort of 3 to 5 year horizon like in your digital transformation? I'm consciously aware of time, so this will be the last question for John. I'll have one more for Tate.
So very quickly, so yes to everything that Janine mentioned, and imagine that that's also augmented with the integrated home monitoring that's in that client's house. So you've got, your falls monitors, you've got your sleep sensors, you've got your all of the other types of sensors in the building to understand how did they sleep well, are they toileting well? Because one of the realities is that people will live at home longer, stay at home longer with more acuity. So it's about having that integration to also the real-time information of the general health status of that client to provide that care. So it's not only the human care, but also the data we need to understand their journey as they age in the home.
Right. Excellent. And so, Tate, we're looking in the crystal ball for 5 years. Janine's given you her sort of 2 or 3 things. John's given a few things. How far away are you from delivering this at the Lookout Way?
Well, we already do the handover summaries. That just came out in June. I think for me, what excites me about AI, because it is knowledge work, because home care is orchestration and knowledge work, the opportunity is to move everything, all those amazing visions that we just heard. It's about moving from a reactive, finding out after the fact model to a proactive, planning ahead and then optimizing. And then that's how you give great service to your clients. And your clients, it's more planning and the plan happening as opposed to finding out after the fact or getting bogged down in admin. And I think that that is the opportunity for AI. It's about improving the quality, but also improving the efficiency at the same time. And I think that good businesses are sustainable, do quality, and are efficient. Those 3 things are intrinsically linked. And I think AI makes some things possible today that weren't possible 10 years ago. So I'm pretty optimistic about the future.
Excellent. I think we all are after this call, and the engagement's been great from the questions. So thank you, everyone, for participating. We have run a minute over time. I'm very respectful of everyone's time for joining us. I'd like to thank John, Janine, and Tate for joining us today. If you'd like to reach out to any of them, please, you're more than welcome to. We'll get their information out to those of you who are on the call. I'm sure Tate would love to share a bit more about what they're doing at the Lookout Way. So this wraps up our webinar for this morning. Thank you to everyone for joining us. Please keep your eyes out. The DCM group will be running another webinar in the month of July. I think we've got it on the 16th, where we're going to be looking at asset management strategies for residential aged care. So keep an eye out for that in your inbox. Until next time, please keep safe, and we will see you again. Tate, John, and Janine, once again, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's been a delight having you as our guests. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.